Okay, so I've been engaged in a very interesting conversation here on Facebook. I came across this post. Uh, the only reason I commented was based on the name of the page. I've seen a couple of their things come up in my feed, and I just figured if I threw this out there, I had a pretty good chance that it was gonna hit the mark, meaning that these people most likely consider themselves some sort of Marxist. So when I saw it, I just figured I'd leave this comment. The meme says, "If I learn about history, Dad says, well, I'll go woke." It must be something to sleep all day like that. And my comment is, if a person learns about history, they likely won't be a Marxist. Voluntary collectivism is fine. State collectivism, not so much. And of course, it's got the mandatory laugh reactions. But so Comrade Jeremy here, he's the one I've been engaged with mostly, and this is, I mean, it's wild to me. But I can see myself 20 years ago in this. So he replies to me, well, you obviously haven't, because Marxism is not state collectivism. Completely the opposite, in fact. Okay, so these are our two premises that I'm attempting to stick to here. I said Marxism is state collectivism. He says, no, it's not. It's the complete opposite, in fact. And then, by the way, corporatism is capitalist collectivism protected by the state. I have no disagreement with that. I'm not sure why he thought that I would disagree with that, but maybe he thought I was just like some Republican or something. But so then he quotes Engels here. When at last it becomes the real representative of the whole society, it renders itself unnecessary. Of course, that implies that the state is at some point necessary for what they're attempting to do here, or they're saying it was necessary for the capitalists to overrule, or the monarchs, or whoever. It's implying that the state is at some point necessary. And my question to that is always just, well, when was the state ever necessary? But he starts off, so in the context of his quotation, he's recognizing that the state plays a role here, and then at last it becomes the real representative of the whole of society, which of course is the alleged outcome of the proletarian revolution put forth in the manifesto, right? So, et cetera, et cetera. He goes on to say, then down here, this is a key point where it says, the first act by virtue of which the state really constitutes itself the representative of the whole of society, the taking possession of the means of production in the name of society. He's saying that's its last independent act as a state. So basically, I'm not exactly sure what he's trying to say here, or why this individual would post this, because it's really making my argument. My argument is that Marxism is a state program, right? They want to use the state to take over the means of production. And the means of production in the Communist Manifesto are, agriculture, factories. It says the state should own factories, and so on and so forth. So, their concept of means of production is basically capital goods. So let's see. So my reply to that, it was interesting to me, because I say, yes, corporatism is capitalist collectivism. I'm not sure why you would think I would argue against that description. And then sarcastically, I say, Marx didn't write that the state was going to centralize all credit, capital, agriculture, transportation, and communication in the socialist revolution. I'm pretty sure he did, which he basically did. That's chapter 2 in the manifesto, leading up to the 10 planks, the political program of the proletariat, right, in their minds. And then, I mentioned Engels says in your own quote that the state is going to take possession of the means of production. So, then he says, no, he didn't. The manifesto was not an explanation of communism. Well, I never said it was an explanation of communism, right? Communism is this vague future society they envision that's stateless and classless and moneyless and all this other stuff, after the proletariat as a political force has centralized the means of production and worked to eradicate the property distinctions and the class distinctions, right? So I'm not saying that this is a description of communism. That's where people get confused. I'm not confused about that. I understand that is not in the manifesto a description of communism. That is the description of the proletariat political agenda. Okay, which my whole point in this is that it's a state collectivist program, and he said no, it isn't, even though his own quote says that the state is going to take the means of production. Okay. Any of this stuff relevant? I've made this video a couple times. I make them on my phone. I'm just trying to stick to the fundamentals of this one this time. Let's see. So, but he tells me, by the way, Marx didn't invent communism. Yes, okay, I know that. He quotes a whole bunch of Marx and Engels, and it's just like really all it does is work against his own argument that Marx is not a state collectivist program. He keeps quoting that he quotes the Engels citation multiple times, and I've asked him. So earlier he said all socialists want worker production, worker owned as opposed to private owned, rather. And my question to that is, what's the difference between worker ownership and private ownership? Because of course, the only distinction between private ownership and is state ownership, basically, right? You can have worker ownership and it's still private ownership. A lot of people try to say communal ownership is not private ownership, but of course it is, as long as it's not state ownership. There's worker-owned enterprises right now that clearly exist in a framework of so-called private ownership. So it's not a distinction between worker and private. Communists think it is, but that's not a valid distinction in economics. Some people say it is, but it's that only makes sense if you say private ownership is only single owner, which it's not actually a very good distinction. Then my question there is, what's the difference between capitalist mode of production and markets? Because earlier the Engels quotes had said our current state of anarchy and production. And so I had said, well, at least he recognizes markets are anarchy, I guess. And he said, well, it's just capitalist production that's anarchy. So, but Engels was right in that, in the sense that markets are anarchy because markets are not following a singular plan that is enforced on them, right? Whereas the state planning is. And so they hate that fact because, Marx even says, confiscate the property of immigrants and stuff. So, and then I quote the manifesto, which the next couple comments are hilarious to me. So Marx and Engels published, quote, "We have seen above," this is like the middle of chapter 2, pretty much the end of chapter 2. "We have seen above, the first step in the revolution by the working class is to raise the proletariat to the position of ruling class to win the battle of democracy." The proletariat is basically the agitators of the working class, the politically motivated and organized representatives of the working class. "The proletariat will use its political supremacy to wrest by degrees all capital from the bourgeoisie, to centralize all instruments of production in the hands of the state, i.e. of the proletariat organized as the ruling class, and to increase the total of productive forces as rapidly as possible through some proletarian magic, of course. These measures will, of course, be different in different countries. Nevertheless, in most advanced countries, the following will be pretty generally applicable." The reason I make sure I put those last two paragraphs in there, that's the last paragraph before the 10 planks are listed, so the political agenda of the proletariat. The reason I put that in there is because, this individual and pretty much every other communist, they like to overlook the manifesto and they downplay it as though that was sanctioned by the League in London, and that only applied to a specific example. No, this was their view of the proletariat political agenda. As it says right there, the following would pretty generally applicable in most advanced countries. So this is not written as just to apply to London or anybody else. It's written to apply to the proletariat as a global class. Okay, the Squanders Live thing, I guess I don't have to talk about that on this one. So then, mind-blowingly, where did you get that from? No source? Well, it's the Communist Manifesto, man, and also you could just Google that word for word and it'll pop right up, And then, he basically reiterates the exact same thing that I'm telling him, but he's denying that that's the plan. He says, again, the first step in the Marxist plan to move from capitalist to socialist production was to form working class political parties in order to form a majority in the bourgeois parliament in London. Yes, okay, that's fine. That's the plan in London. It's also the plan in all states that capitalism exists. That was the point of chapter 2 in the Communist Manifesto. It is the political program of the proletariat, which is the politically organized representative of the working class, was to take power of the state and wrest by degrees all capital from the bourgeoisie. That is the point. Through the mechanism of the state, to centralize all instruments of production in the hands of the state. This is my whole argument he's making for me. He's just so blind to it that he doesn't realize what he's actually posting. I mean, that's the only thing I can think of at this point is, I mean, Marxism is a cult. So he can keep posting the same thing over and over again and just not realize what it means. Let's see. The aim of the Communist League was not to form a state, but to overthrow the bourgeoisie. Okay, well, the point was, as they explicitly noted, was to get the proletariat into political power and take over the state, and then take the capital away from the bourgeoisie and centralize, quote, all manner of production into the hands of the state under the proletariat as the ruling class. So, then I mentioned that's from the Manifesto, Chapter 2. And I don't care who asked him to write it. I care that he and Engels wrote it. They wrote that the proles are going to take control of the state, use the state to become the ruling class, centralize all instruments of production in the hands of the state, and that it is generally applicable to most advanced countries. And then I say, as Bakunin said, Marx is a government man. And he says right here, but again, that is not what it says. I mean, are we speaking a different language here? Are we reading a different book? I mean, I am using his own citation to say to point out where Engels said that the state is going to seize control of the means of production. So I'm not sure what he's talking about. You have to read it and understand it all. No, I've read it and I understand it thoroughly. I have provided the proof that they did not aim to create a new state at all. I mean, that's not really what I said. Just abolish the one that already existed. No. In fact, you've said that they're trying to get into Parliament, which was the currently existing state. So what is this individual even going on about here? And he says, why do folks always focus on the state being a part of socialism? So where's my reply to that? Because, the state becomes the real representative of the whole society. The state takes possession of the means of production. And then this is actually a plank from the Communist Manifesto, centralization of credit and capital in the hands of the state with a national bank and an exclusive monopoly. Indeed, why do people always focus on the state being part of Marxist socialism? I mean, he has literally posted citations himself that are Engels saying that they're going to take over the state and use the state to centralize production in the hands of the state. So I'm not exactly sure what this individual is doing here. And then I quoted Nietzsche there. And then he says, I already explained it. Working people forming political parties to get voted into office in the London Parliament in order to gain the majority which would give the working class the power over the capitalist class. That was the outline in the manifesto. Yeah, I'm the one who posted the outline in the manifesto. I mean, that's basically what I'm saying, is that the manifesto says that the proletariat is going to take power from the state, take power in the state. So take over the state and use the state to take over production, to centralize production. That is exactly, literally what they wrote. That's literally what it says, and that's what he himself has posted. So I'm not understanding where the disconnect here is. He just doesn't want to recognize, because he no doubt envisions this fantasy Marxist state where, it's all 100% consensus, or I'm not exactly sure what he believes in at this point, because it seems like he's just repeating this stuff without actually reading the quotations that he himself posts. I say, I know the plan outlined in the manifesto. I just posted it. And you have said, get voted into office in Parliament in order to gain power over the capitalist class. And then Engels and Marx wrote that the proles will become the ruling class and then take the means of production into the hands of the state. You are explaining it, but then saying it doesn't mean what it says, which is literally exactly what's happening. You are saying the state has no place in Marxist socialism, which he said earlier, that it was not a state collectivist program, and that it's not about taking power of the state. And then you yourself are posting citations where they are saying the working class are going to enter Parliament, become the state. And then you're saying that's not what it says. And then he replied, we're just going around in circles here. And it's like, well, no, you're the one going around in circles, man. Like, you are making my own argument for me by posting things from Engels that say that the state is going to take over the means of production. Explained by Engels for about the fourth time. And then he uses the same exact quote. where it says, you know, right here, the taking possession of the means of production in the name of the society. And, in the Communist Manifesto, Marx mentions that the state, i.e., the proletariat, as the ruling class. So he's saying he recognized that the state is being used as the ruling class, is going to create the new ruling class. The proletariat is going to take over the state, become the new ruling class, and centralize the means of production in the hands of the state. That's exactly word for word. Well, I mean, I guess I'm paraphrasing that, but word for word, basically what these guys have said. And he's just denying this reality as he posted himself. Like, I'm not understanding. And then, so my reply to this is, so when Engels says the state is going to take possession of the means of production, and he and Marx wrote that the proletariat, the manifestation of the working class as a political force, takes the power of the state, becomes the new ruling class, and centralizes credit, capital, transportation, communication, etc. in the hands of the state, he's actually not saying that the proletarians are going to take over the state and centralize those things in the hands of the state. I mean, it's complete. It's lunacy. It's lunacy. It's complete cult nonsense. I mean, I'm not understanding how this guy can be posting what I am saying that the Marxists say, and then saying that's not what they said. Like that, he literally just said that the state's going to become the real representative of the whole of society through some magical transformation, and then it's going to render itself unnecessary because it's going to destroy the class and property distinctions. That was the whole program that they believed in. The proletariat, which is the political movement of the working class, is going to take over the state, get in power in the state, and then centralize the means of productions in the hands of the state on behest of the so-called society of the proletariat. So, yeah, completely mind-blowing interaction here. Like, I'm not understanding how this guy can just keep posting this thing over and over again and just clearly never actually soak up what it means. I think it mostly is just because he doesn't know what a state is. Like, he has this vague conception of a state. And I mean, obviously he thinks that the state can be the representative of the whole society to begin with, which, many anarchists and myself on the videos in this channel explain how that's just nonsense conceptualization, right? Of floating amorphous abstraction that could never actually be. So, but yeah, very interesting. I just kind of wanted to document this one. And just mind-blowing. Of course, I asked him several questions which he never bothered to even try to answer. I mentioned those two earlier, and then the one that I really want an answer to is, how do you expect the state to become the, quote, real representative of the whole society? Like, what are the mechanisms for that? Besides getting voted into parliament, and having 100% representation in government, so-called, I guess. I'm not sure. I really would like to have him work through how that's going to happen, because then maybe if he's going through the mechanisms in his mind, he'll realize that what I am saying is exactly what they said and what he has posted that they said, and yet he's denying that that's what they said. They didn't say that they were going to take over the state and centralize the means of production. They said that they were going to get into parliament, and then, the state was going to take possession of the means of production. I mean, that's literally what Engels wrote. So, not really sure where to go from here. I might just leave it at that. I don't really think there's any hope for this person at this point, because now it's been turned into we're just going around in circles here, and it's again, this was explained. Yeah, what was explained, comrade, was that the Marxists' plan was for the proletariat to take over the state and then centralize the means of production in the hands of the state. So, yeah, interesting engagement.